Seniors off first, 1 minute later the vet 40s, and 1 minute later the old guys.
The old guys. It's always a good laugh doing cyclocross. Alright, welcome back. Welcome back. This is a casual reaction video, 1 hour long, maybe something for your next turbo session, who knows, of the last round of the Welsh Cyclocross League. Oh, GoPro camera has been noticed, and we nearly missed the start. Okay, I'm going to try my best to keep on topic and to talk you through this race, because, like, there's always, I always feel like in a cyclocross race, there are loads of different stories from the race. There's almost like a story every single lap. So I'm going to try and keep things interesting by every lap changing the topic I'm going to talk about. So let's kick things off first with the first lap. So like in most cyclocross races, you start on a section of the course that you don't actually do again. So they keep you away from the course, in effect. So this first lap, I counted how many riders there were in front of me on this section. Not during the race, like when I was watching the footage. I've only skimmed through the footage, so some of this is going to be my actual reaction to it. And at this point in time, so we're like a minute into the race, I'm sitting in around 25th to 26th position. And my first lap of this is my third race that I've done, my third cyclocross race that I've done. My first lap is always my slowest. And that is primarily because I'm not confident enough to push on. And I'm also aware that my technical ability might mean that I'm getting in the way of other people. That might be false. That might be false. But I don't feel like I can fully commit on the first lap. And that's something I think if I come back and do more cyclocross races, I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to try and make that first lap my fastest lap. Because the guys who, finish, well, I'm not going to say finish in a top 10 or top 5, but virtually every single senior in this race does their fastest lap on the first lap. My opening lap was a 9:08, and everyone else sort of in the top 5 or top 10 had an opening lap around the 8 minute to 8 minute 30 mark. So I was about 30 to 45 seconds off the pace with the front, front 5 or front 10 on this first lap. Now the flip side of that is that when the field opens up and it's less, manic and there's not as much traffic on the course with other riders, then I'm able to settle and pick my lines and really get going. It's not because I don't know the course, because like everybody else, we have a chance to ride the course before the race. So riding the course beforehand, I thought that I'd have a good chance at riding virtually all the course, and how wrong I was. After this bit, you'll soon see, but there's a very, very boggy section which I assumed was rideable, and then during the race, within the first couple of meters of riding it, I soon realized that it wasn't rideable. I'm just gonna pour myself a cup of coffee. I don't know whether you can hear that on the microphone or not. I apologize if you can. I'm conscious I don't have to fill every single minute of this video with me talking, because it's quite nice to immerse yourself in the sounds of squealing disc brakes and shouting riders and fans at the side of the road. So I will take breaks from talking so that you can enjoy it. But this section is like a single track section pretty much. It's part of, I think, like the mountain bike development in this park. And it's probably the most technical part of the course, with the constant twists and turns.
Yeah.
And there's a perfect example of that pressure I was talking about. Just it wasn't. I just don't like that feeling of people being right behind me, and it puts me off, and I feel like I'm slowing people down. It sounds really stupid me saying this, but like that's how it makes me feel. So I would rather like get out of the way or tell them, like, you know, come through if you want to come through, just so that I'm not affecting their race. But that's the first lap. We've come through the finish line, and we go through like this next section of like purpose-built circuit, as you can tell. And at this point, like, I'm assuming that the race has settled down a bit now, because we've been going for like 6 minutes or so, and we hit the first section of the mud, and I'm still riding here, I'm still riding, and then I jump off because I realise that it's just unrideable. Guys, just come straight through there. That is the leader of the next category, next age category up. So not in the senior race, but in the next race, and he's just flying. Like, even they're running. Like, I didn't carry my bike. I pushed my bike. I can't carry my bike. I'm not strong enough, but it's also quite awkward. So I haven't got that technique. So I just make do with just pushing the bike. And there's a rather pathetic attempt of like trying to get going there from me, because I tried to get on the bike for the first time. Like, that's my first mount for a while, and I get it all wrong, and my pedals are in the wrong place, and you know, everything technique wise that you should probably like practice, I hadn't practiced, so I was a little bit rusty getting back on. This was like, I would say this was like my favorite, some of my favorite sections of the course. I go completely to the wrong side of the fence there because my front wheel disappeared, and it sent me the wrong side, so don't hate me. It was obvious that other people had done the same thing. But I was slowly learning. So over the first 2 races, I was learning like how to ride corners in cyclocross, because previously, you know, in the last 2 races, I've been riding corners as if I was like riding on the road. So I would like come into it at speed and then shave off speed, but I'd freewheel around the corner, and then I would like get on the power coming out of it, but like almost too much power, and then you start losing traction, and there's this balance. But I don't know if you can tell, but on the corners we've just done, I was, obviously you can't see me pedaling, but you can see the way I come into the corner wide, hit the apex, and then come out of the corner wide. And not every single corner needs to be taken like that, but like I was trying to make a conscious effort to almost make the course as straight as possible. So like here I head straight across the course to the other side, rather than staying to the left. Obviously there was a lot of mud there, but I was making an effort to like go out wide. Like there again, I stray out to the left hand side to just try and make the course straight, so that I'm not doing as much banking, I'm not doing as much turning. Nice little feature on the course here was this bridge. Marshall shouting at me saying the sun's coming out, which was kind of nice because it was pouring with rain earlier in the day. But I don't know if you can tell already, but the course is quite hilly. To give you some stats on the actual race itself, I rode for almost exactly an hour. 14.3 kilometers I managed to cover in, I think it was 6 laps. Ended up doing 6 laps. I'll give you the lap breakdown now in a second. But I climbed 400 meters of elevation in total, which I think I'm right in saying is a heck of a lot. Like, when you consider if you were out on the road and you climbed, 400 meters of elevation out on the road in 14 kilometers, like, you'd almost have to be going pretty much uphill the whole time. Like, it's a lot. It's a fair amount. Unless, of course, you live somewhere that was fairly hilly. So that was a bike change from the rider in front. He changed from, I imagine, a cyclocross bike to a mountain bike. Really shows here the difference. Well, not so much difference in cyclocross bike and a mountain bike, but certainly like my ability on a cyclocross bike versus his ability on a mountain bike. And possibly with a little bit of suspension, because this bit, although it was the fastest section of the course, it was also quite bumpy. The rider was pulling away, and another overtake. I'm assuming this rider, oh, I'm in the tree. I'm assuming this rider was from the category above, racing in the race, the age category above. So I'm getting passed by 1, 2, 3 riders here or there, but I'm fairly confident they're not in my race, because obviously the first lap it was kind of like a filter lap. I found myself in that kind of 25th, 26th position, catching the mountain bike rider here. I don't know if you notice on this section there's quite a few rocks, and they've actually sprayed the rocks with like a green paint. So they're quite easy to spot. There's one big one just coming up here in a second. And it was actually more difficult than it looks to avoid them, because you're obviously running low pressures. I was running about 18 psi in this race. But the traction was not a problem for me. Running the Challenge Limas tires. With the, I think you can like change, so depending on which way you put the tire on, you can change the shape of the knobs on the tire, so you can have them to be like more grippy one way than the other. I don't know if that's correct, but I had them the way round, which in my head I thought, if this part of the tire grabs the ground first, then surely that's more traction. I don't think any point in this race that I can think of did I have any issues anywhere with traction, like apart from maybe when I was out of the saddle going in a straight line and putting down like 400 plus watts, maybe there, but on corners I don't think I had any problems at all. Nothing out of the ordinary anyway. And talking about power, because most people don't run a power meter for cyclocross races, for good reason, but I run the risk, because the bike I'm on, the Factor LS, I use for like basically all of my winter riding. I've had a couple of people saying like, is the bike I'm on now the same bike that I do my hill climbs on and what I did the whole route in Cyclocross on? And it's not. They're two different bikes. There's no way I'm taking a low to VAM on this sort of terrain. I can tell you that. That is a very delicate frame for very delicate uphill things, and downhill things, obviously. But yeah, it's not the same bike. So this bike is my winter training bike, virtually, or I guess that's what I've called it. So during the week when I'm just riding out on the road, it's got 28mm Hutchinson Fusion 5 road tires on it. You know, and I'm running, you know, about 60 psi in those, and then I go to some gravel rides with my mates, and you know, we're running 35-40 psi in my gravel kings from Panaracer, and then you know, I switched to the Challenge Lima, so I'm running like 18 psi, and it's all on the same bike. So I just change the tires on the wheels, and you know, job's a good one. Does exactly what I want. So rolling through start finish, I was trying to look at the lap board then, but they hadn't put it out. They were probably still calculating the lap speed of the guy who is currently leading. The winner in the end was Spencer Davis, who was an under-23 rider for the Wales Racing Academy, followed by Ryan Manders, who rides for Pembrokeshire Velo, and then Thomas Crapper from Abergavenny Road Club, also another under-23. So that was the top three, and they were posting some pretty rapid times, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, my power data from the race, obviously most just use heart rate data. My average heart rate was 163 beats a minute. My max was 177. Cadence average 70. Average power was 200 watts. Max power was 700 watts. Normalized power though, so that's really if you take into consideration, you know, the freewheeling or the surging nature of a cyclocross race, normalized power sort of evens out that discrepancy, or not discrepancy, but that difference between your average and your lowest power and your highest power, and it kind of gives you that middle number, and that number was about 255 watts, which is only like a 75% intensity factor, meaning, you know, about 75% of my FTP, which, you know, you could do that for hours and hours, but when you look at the distribution of said power in this race, it's actually a whole different story. I actually spend half of this race, almost exactly half of it, 30 minutes, between 0 and 200 watts. And if we looked at that in more detail, it was probably a case of like half of that again. So 15 minutes of the race was probably spent at 0 watts. And then another half an hour was spent between, you know, that sort of maybe 25 watts and 200 watts. And then from there, it's quite an even distribution. You know, from zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5, zone 6, it's roughly 10%. You know, between 5 and 10% of the rest of my time was spent in those other zones. So it's not, you know, you wouldn't say it's a good training session. There's a lot of unspecific work there, but I was pretty happy with the way I was able to repeat certain efforts. So I was pretty happy with how much I could really accelerate out of the mud, accelerate up some of the little climbs, and get back on the power a lot quicker. Like, I probably did quite a bit of time over 450 watts, you know, in surges here and there, which is, on a course like this, like, it's pretty demanding, and you notice it massively near the end of this race. So we're coming up to like the 20-minute mark, and oh, dive bomb. We're getting to like the 20-minute mark, so we're a third of the way through, and what's happened so far is I've clocked like a 9:08 opening lap, and then I've clocked an 8:48 second lap, and the third lap, which is I think what we're on now, is my fastest lap, but not by much. It's only my fastest lap by about 5 seconds, but I managed to log 6 laps in total, and 4 of those 6 laps. If you actually, let's take out the first lap, because the first lap is like an outlier, because I do a 9:08 first lap. But if you look at the lap 2, lap 3, lap 4, lap 5, lap 6, So if you look at those other 5 laps, my differences in time are about 14 seconds between my fastest time and my slowest time. So I don't know if that's fairly consistent. I would imagine it is, like, because that lap is pretty long for me. Like a 9-minute lap is a fairly long lap, I think. I'm still kind of new to this, but I certainly felt like I was making progress in the second half of the race versus the first half. There was a lot more clearer road in front of me, clearer path in front of me. There was less people, around. So I found myself, for a minute at a time, sometimes longer, having, all the time in the world to, like this bit now, line up for this bit, which is quite a tricky one. You go down and then it like drops really quick, but then it gets a little bit sort of sketchy just on that bit when you're starting to get back on the power. But I was learning every lap. I was getting better every lap. Although my lap times don't generally get any faster, I would say that came down to, the extra weight on the bike. Like the mud was really starting to stick now. And I would probably also put that down to like just my general fatigue. I think my first couple of laps after that first lap were a fairly decent, like decently fast time. But then I was starting to lose that snap. Like I said about like doing the short, steep bits, like this section here now where we just go up this little bit and you take a lot of speed off and then you just try and get back up to speed as quick as possible. I was starting to lose that as the race went on, and then add on, that extra weight, however much that is with the mud as well, then that just compounds, you going, 5 seconds slower every lap or something. It's actually something that you probably don't realize until, you're in the event. And that's where having a second bike or pit crew really helps, doesn't it? Like, you have someone to hose your bike down, then just grab a fresh bike and away you go, and you're not sort of penalized by that weight. But I think to go back to the lap times, like, if my maths is correct, and I think it is, like we're on lap 3 currently. So with this being my fastest lap, I've had a pretty clear run. I've had a good stab at this. And like I said, I'm slowly getting into it. I'm finding the right corners, the right lines. I'm finding the right gears as well. Like that's something that, like here now where you come through this section, I was like in the small ring just to shimmy around this section because it was worth it just to be able to keep my cadence up to get back up to speed quicker. But then as soon as I dropped down these, because I wasn't able to pedal much on this section, like keeping the speed up. I mean, they talk about speed limits on cyclocross courses, and like I really learned about that in this one. There was like no going any faster, at least for me. But then as soon as I got down off of this and onto here, I could get straight into the big ring, which I'm sure you can hear. Yeah, you can hear the front mech just doing this little R2D2 thing. But my positioning now, I wouldn't even be able to guess where I am currently in the race. But to give you an idea, so if I started, apparently 25 riders finished this race. So there was obviously quite a few mechanicals. The mud was causing problems. The exposed rock on that bottom section of the course that I was talking about, where they highlighted the rocks with the green paint, were causing problems, and people were actually, DNFing. They weren't able to finish. And if I say there was like 35 starters, give or take, and I was in 25th place in the first lap, if I look down the results, and I'm looking at it right now, and I've got my opening lap is a 9:08. That puts me in the region of like the type of times that people are doing in about 15th to 20th place. But then my second lap, which is 20 seconds faster than my first lap, that puts me in amongst the top 10. So the people in the top 10 are lapping at the same time as I am. But of course, because I've lost that time in the first lap, I'm not in the top 10. But it's after lap 3. So when I put down my fastest time on lap 3, my lap 3 time, which is an 8:41, it's a fair bit slower than first place. So I'm not even going to attempt to compare myself. But it's actually the second fastest lap 3 from any other rider in the race. So, well, actually it's the third fastest, because if we count first place. So I am, in lap 3, I've just put down the third fastest lap 3 of anybody else in the race. And lap 4, it's a similar story. I'm in that ballpark of like the top 5. I'm lapping as fast as the top 5 riders. And then it just gets better from there, basically, because I don't drop off. Like I said, the difference between my fastest lap, my slowest lap, taking out that first lap, is about 15 seconds. So, whereas if you look at the riders in the top 10, there seems to be this general theme of they post their fastest lap in the first lap, like an 8:07 or 8:10 or an 8:20, but then their last lap is like a minute slower than their first lap. And that's intriguing, because it's not really, I don't think it's down to a positive split. Like I don't think it's night and day. I don't think it's like time trialing where, you know, you say, if I'm going to go out and we're doing this hilly course and I want to invest a lot of energy in this first lap. I don't think it works like that per se. I think that's just the way it works out, because everyone's following everybody else in front. So if you find yourself in the top 10 at the start, you're going to get sucked along, and you just happen to post that lap as your fastest lap because you're just following the person in front of you, maybe. Because I've never been in that situation, I don't really know. Oh, coffee's nice. This bit here, this bit was a pretty wearing down section. Trying to get back up to speed here, because once you get on the gravel right here, you can really get up to speed quickly. You can see the acceleration there straight away. And I can't remember if it was this lap, or it was one of the laps where you could see all the mud coming off my tyres. Is mental. I just did a couple of like hops, like just a couple of jumps on the bike, bunny hops, just to try and like shake some of that mud off. Because it was, I could look down and I could see it was just caked everywhere. If you saw the vlog, you would have seen like just how bad it was caked on. But yeah, the lap times, like my last lap, which was an 8:46, was my second fastest lap of the race, which was on my last lap, and I didn't get lapped. You know, that's a first. No, it's not. No, the last race, where I came 9th, I didn't actually get lapped. And when I finished 9th, I was 55 seconds off 5th place. Another fun fact, actually, was the first race I did, which was a bone-dry Welsh Championship course. I averaged 150 beats a minute, and the second race I did, which was a very sort of, right, I'm gonna attempt to give you an idea of different types of mud right now. But you've got this mud, which is like a sticky sort of sloppy mud. And then the mud I had in my second race, the one before this one, was like a wet mud, like a slimy mud, not a sticky mud or sloppy mud, but a slimy mud. So in that race I averaged 160 beats a minute, and in this race I averaged 164 beats a minute, or 163 beats a minute. So I'm slowly starting to find my ability to push harder, and I'm just measuring that simply by heart rate, but or let's say work harder then, because that is a measure. Well, obviously power is a measure of work, but you know, to keep things as straightforward as possible, there's no getting away from the fact that you're going from 150 beats a minute to 160 to 163 or 164. So in that regard, I am working harder. I also found my voice in this race. In other words, I wasn't afraid to shout at people in a nice way. You know, to say, excuse me, I'm coming through, you know, coming through on your right, coming through on your left, whatever it may be. Make room for me, please. So I think that certainly helped me. I wasn't stuck behind people. I wasn't being overly cautious. I was committing, and I wasn't like, I was trying to think ahead. And what on some of my notes that I made, actually, that thinking ahead is one of those things that you have to do on a muddy race. I think I've discovered that, like, you can't afford to switch off, or you can't afford to let your mind wander for a second because you're already into the next corner. Or, you know, mud is a strange one, because one lap there could be a rut there that, you know, everyone's been going through, and the next lap there could be a fresh rut that's like 5 or 6 centimeters to the right of it, and everyone's now going down that one. And it's quite easy to spot them, because, you know, you can see the deepest trench that people are riding through, and you're always looking for the path of least resistance, and sometimes you just automatically go for it. But if you've never gone down that before, then you don't know how you're going to react to it, or how the bike's going to react to it. So I'm catching up with another rider here, and I'm going to have a look to see if I can find a race number. I want to give people some shout outs, because I've got my act together in this one, and I can actually see the race results in front of me, which I'm holding off telling you, although the title of this video is probably going to give it away. I'll tell you anyway. I actually came 6th place in this race. I came 6th, and it kind of shocked me, but it also didn't kind of shock me, because I realized I wasn't catching anybody anymore in the last kind of 2 laps, and I thought, okay, I must be in and amongst, you know, some riders at a similar level. So I assumed that I was in the top 10. I didn't think I was. I kind of didn't think I was that far up. I got to be honest. But this now is. So I'm looking for the results. We're looking for number 13. I think I just passed there. No, it can't be number 13. There is no number 13 on the results. No, strange. Anyway, yeah. So my last 2 laps then. So my last 2 laps were an 8:53 and an 8:46. And if I look up from 6th place and above, everybody was doing roughly the same lap time as me on that last lap. Last but one lap, sorry. So we're all roughly doing that 8:50 mark. Just coming up, I got to give a shout out to Matt, who's on the right here, riding for Cardiff Jiff. Cardiff Jiff actually put this event on. Fantastic event. I've raced against this club, Cardiff Jiff, for years. Like, ever since I started racing, which is like 13 odd years ago. And they have this lovely green kit with like a little a little yellow lemon on their kit, or at least they used to. I'm pretty sure they still have it there. But yeah, there's Matt. Matt loves cyclocross. He's well into it, and he's been very enthusiastic and very encouraging of my racing. So thank you very much for that, Matt. I'm very appreciative of it. So I think that was. So Matt finished 8th place, and I think I'm right in saying that my last lap, which was an 8:46, was, well, this is the first time I've actually looked at this, but my 8:46 last lap, to put that as my second fastest lap of the race, was almost 50 seconds faster than 5th place's last lap. It was 20 seconds faster than 4th place's last lap. It was 20 seconds faster than 3rd place's last lap, and it was 10 seconds faster than 2nd place's last lap. So a couple of people messaged me since this race, and they've said, what did you have for breakfast this morning? What did you have for breakfast before this race? Because apparently I was going quite well. and I to be honest, I'm a little bit shocked, but I honestly think it's just down to the course. I think just like in the world of road racing, I think it is horses for courses. So if you're good at going uphill and you're a light rider, then you probably will benefit. At the end of the day, you're only racing the people who are in the race, and this wasn't the Welsh Cyclocross Championships where I came. What did I come? I came 31st in the Welsh Cyclocross Championships. It was my first event, to be fair, but I was 3 minutes off 20th place, and I was lapped. So the caliber of riders is much different, but I'm not going to put down my ride, because this was definitely my best ride. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back and the kudos for that. But I think like if I want to come back and do this at the end of this year, which is the next season, I wouldn't mind trying to put some effort into trying to actually win an event. That would be pretty, I would have to be I would have to be virtually a minute faster a lap. In this race, I would have to be a minute a lap faster at least. My opening lap would have to be better. So there's a couple of things I'd have to do. I'd have to be a much more aggressive opening lap, and I think I would also have to just be lapping faster in general, which is a combination of lots of things. It's a combination of just having that confidence, but I think a lot of it comes down to the technique, because I would like to know how much of a difference there was between me and a couple of riders. Oh, there's Dylan. Shout out Dylan, just gone past Dylan. A couple of I'd be interested to know how much time I was losing on certain sections. Where was I losing my most time? I would like to think that I was holding my own on these sections where it was a 1 minute slog to the top of the hill, and there wasn't a lot of technique involved, and I would like to think that the only place I'm losing time is the very technical areas or the fast sections where I'm just lacking a bit of confidence, and that's something I can improve on. So I'm hoping the fitness element, well, I'm pretty sure the fitness element is okay. But yeah, maybe when there's when there's a chance, you know, there's a race when, you know, maybe a couple of people are sick, or, you know, a couple of people have some mechanicals or whatever. I'm not wishing bad luck on anybody, but maybe we could get close to that win. Certainly looking at my lap times in the last couple of laps, aside from the first lap, who knows? So it's exciting, and I've really enjoyed it. I've very much enjoyed it. So yeah, I mean, the last, I would say, up until this point, so about 40 minutes into the race, I'd been riding this wave of, I suppose, adrenaline. You know, everything was coming together. I was floating through the corners. I was just really like on top of everything. And then it was about this time, because we were about to hit the finish line again for, I think, 2 laps to go, where I was like, oh, this is this is starting to bite now. This is starting to hurt a little bit, but I knew that it's, when you got something to focus on, like in this race, there was a obvious start and an obvious end to each effort you were making. So, you know, like this section now, like this is hard. You're trying to get through this bit, and then once you get over it, you're into the mud, and then you can run. And although you're not recovering in the mud, you're off the bike. So it's like a mental break. So I was breaking down the course. I was breaking down the laps. So there we have it. We're starting my penultimate lap, and I'm really giving it everything I've got now on the bits where it's opened up and there's nobody in front of me. And I think it's this lap that I really get a lot of confidence in my ability, because, you know, I've been picking people off now for the last couple of laps, and I've started to notice that nobody's coming past me. And that's not the same for everybody, granted, you know, and it's the first race I was doing, people were virtually always coming past me, and I was sort of just having races with people who I was always with, you know, the whole lap. Because that's the cool thing with cyclocross, is like, if you find yourself in a position where, you know, you're not in the race, quote unquote, you know, you're a bit behind where the actual race is happening, and you're having a race with, like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 people around you. It wasn't the case in this race. I was kind of in no man's land now, and I was just catching people that I assumed were, you know, lapped riders, because you have no idea where you are. And this section, you can build up a lot of speed, and speed is obviously, average speed is the thing that wins you the race. But I was having more and more confidence with where, like, whereas before, where if it was really quick, I'd be like really tentative. Whereas like today in this race, I was like, I'm not gonna crash, like I'm not gonna fall. I said it to myself, I'm like, I can go fast, and no matter what happens, no matter which way the tyres or the wheels go, which direction they point, like I'm not going to hit anything. There's very few obstacles, or there's very few things to hit, like in general. But I was very adamant that I was going to be very safe, regardless of, you know, how fast I was going, or how much risk I was taking. And you can see, like, great little dismount. I actually left that really late. I love the way that gentleman there gets on his bike. That's like that's a classic, the old school way that is. I remember doing that when I was in school. But these corners I'm stringing together really well. I catch up with a rider who I think I know. We had a word at the start of the race, and unfortunately I catch his crash on camera. So that's 2 cyclocross crashes I've caught on my GoPro now. So I might have to do a compilation video. That corner I was getting far more confident on. I mucked up that bit there because I was I was a little bit overconfident. But I was finding my place with like getting my leg out and letting the bike be a bit more free under me. You know, very little touching of the brakes and just letting the bike just be free, and just having my leg there just in case it wanted to touch the floor and save the day. But you know, I do these videos and I you know, I'm just talking you through the race really, but I'm no expert at this really. Like, I'm just giving you like a reaction of how I feel, what's going through my mind during this race. And technique wise, I'm just sort of picking it up as I go along. I'm not, you know, I'm certainly not a rider that, you know, has been winning these races for a number of years, but I don't think that should stop any of us from sharing our journey or our progression or being proud of that. Like, you don't have to win to be proud of your effort. You don't have to be the best to share your to share your experience, or for people to find value in it. I think some people might cringe and think like, you know, Ed Laverack's giving cyclocross advice, and he's not even a cyclocross rider. I think I'm not really giving advice, I'm just sharing an experience, and whether or not that gives you you know, tips or advice, or whether that gives you anything valuable, then so be it, you know. But yeah. Now you see that bit there where it drops down. So I was told by people on the day that the best line was actually not the line that people were taking, and I wonder if the faster guys were taking the line just slightly to the right of it, because it was... Oh, there's a lot of people here. I didn't realize how many people there were here, actually. But there was like a faster line which didn't have the drop off on it. It was a bit smoother, so you could just shoot off the banking and straight onto the... So you didn't have to turn as much. You could almost like cut the corner somewhat, even though there was a little tree in the way. So if you hit that, you'd be in big trouble. But I know that I wasn't confident at cutting it too much. Like, I liked where I was, and I was happy with that. I think I would have required more practice to be confident at nailing it. But yeah, this section here, I don't know if you noticed from way earlier in the race, but there's a bit of a section just back there where there was like there was a log, and someone moved the log, and some of us were like, we didn't know which way that, like, had they like changed the route. So like some people I think were going across there thinking that was the new route, and some people were staying on like what was the original course. I don't know, it only cut off like 2 seconds worth of the course, but it was yeah. The trouble is when you're following people, the trouble is when you're following people, sometimes you're on autopilot and you just follow the wheel in front. So that's where I was like, which way do we go here? Anyway, I'm gonna finish my coffee and we're gonna pick things back up with the commentary on the last lap. Alright, last lap. Let's get it. I'm absolutely full gas here. Gotta be careful because these things just, like, they send you out like properly. Like, I didn't really know how to ride them properly, so when I was coming at that speed, I was almost like going over those bumps and then hitting the next one before I knew it. And yeah, it was quite tough. I don't know if the GoPro is like picking up me, like basically like shouting at people saying this is hard work. But yeah, final time through the mud. I did actually see, did I see one person? I think I saw one person ride in through the mud, but I can't remember exactly if they managed to get all the way through or not. But anyway, I'm still catching riders, and I mount here. I have a good remount, and I'm back on here now. I want you to keep an eye open this lap for a red, white, and blue jersey in front of me, which is the Cardiff Ajax rider, Dan Powell, that finished just in front of me. And to give you some context, because at the minute we can't see Dan, I don't think, unless that's him just down there at the far end going around that corner. We'll see in a second as he comes closer to the camera. No, that's a different jersey. So giving Dan a shout out, because Dan finished in 5th place, top five finish. Opening lap was an 8:23, and my opening lap was a 9:08. His second lap was an 8:32. Mine was an 8:48. Third lap 8:54. Mine was an 8:41. Lap 4, his was a 9:08, and mine was an 8:59. Lap 5, his was a 9:19, mine was an 8:53. And the final lap was Dan's slowest lap, and a minute slower than his first lap. He did a 9:25. Yeah, and I did an 8:46. So this is the lap where I take a chunk out of it, basically. And at one point in the race, I would say after the second lap, Dan would have been, I got quick maths to do now, Dan would have probably been about 50 seconds ahead of me, give or take. But on the last lap, I virtually close 40 of those seconds in one lap. My maths is not my strong point. But it just goes back to what I said earlier in the video, if you didn't catch it, where most people have a very fast start, and then, you know, generally their faster laps are at the start. But mine seems to be, well, it doesn't seem to be the other way around. It just seems to me that my laps don't really change. And as bizarre as it sounds, like, you know, it's far from being an endurance event. You know, it's 59 minutes, it's 60 minutes of hard work. But there is to a certain extent, you know, the muscular endurance, you know, the lactate threshold and everything else comes into this, and how much time you can spend above that as well. Like I said, referring to how much time I spent, you know, over lactate threshold, or, you know, let's keep it simple, like over FTP. And obviously the higher FTP, the more you've got there to give. So yeah, we still can't even see Dan here. So this is the first time, because I wasn't even, you know, when you're in the race, you have no idea where you are. But when I was coming down here, I had no clue, you know, if I was fighting for 6th place, 5th place, 3rd place, 8th place. I had no idea. So I was just, it was what it was. I could tell there were riders in front of me, and I was just trying to pick them off one by one, regardless. I was pretty chuffed with this bit here. I actually overtook a rider, Kunkan Paragon rider, shout out, on the downhill. It shows I grew some cojones and just went for it. Whereas before I probably would have hung back, but I had to go there, otherwise potentially I would have been behind that rider for this bit, and I wouldn't have been able to choose my line. So we're going to straighten up for the last section through the woods and uphill on this sort of slimy mud. Can see a rider there in the distance. Is that the rider in question? Always a little blob of mud to get off my screen, but we'll soon see. We're coming up now. We're getting closer and closer to the top of this climb, and we'll be able to pick the rider out the closer we get to it. But I suppose this really goes to show that the difference on certain sections, like I said earlier, about where am I losing time, where am I gaining time. I think it's obvious this little climb here was about a minute to a minute and a half in length, you know, by the time you take in this section as well. And this is, yeah, that is the 5th place rider in front of us right there. So the gap would have been, I don't know, can't even take a guess at it. Like at the bottom of that descent, I wouldn't even been able to guess. But now we're obviously together. But I have no idea that that's 5th place. Although I soon get an idea when we head through this bit and the rider is pulling away from me, because I haven't been overtaken technically for the last 45 minutes. I realise now that this rider must be in the same, well, not in the same race, but must be ahead of me. Must be a place ahead of me, because I haven't had like a proper sort of back and forth with another rider during this race until this moment. So I realise at this moment, but of course I also realise that I'm not as technically gifted. When I said not technically gifted, I mean basically I'm not taking these corners as well. And I can see the rider. This is what cyclocross is so fun. Like the rider's just there. Like 5th place is just there. Like I've just got to push a little bit more, but there's a speed limit on the course and you've got to take risk, but there's also like, you know, I probably should have taken more risk, because, you know, 7th place was a minute and a half behind. So I could have taken more risk and crashed potentially and still managed to finish in 6th place. But it is what it is. It disappeared away now over these little bumps. I just about see his helmet there and his jersey take off in the distance as he lines up for the finish.